we have massive challenges in Africa, yet you continue to build and run a business in Africa, and a very successful one. Why do you continue to stick around? Is it because you're fulfilling a very particular role of connecting not only cities, but people and businesses, or because there's a gap, or because you do it despite the fact that there are so many problems on the continent? You are very optimistic. When we talk to you, you're always the glass half full guy. Yet you face all these operational challenges in running the business on the continent. You continue to do it. Why?
Yeah, Francois, I could probably spend the entire day talking about it. But I think the point is exactly what you've said earlier on. You know, these challenges present wonderful opportunities for everybody. You know, the reality is logistics makes the world go round. There's absolutely no doubt. Without logistics, economies won't function. Without logistics, and in fact, if goods and services don't cross borders, soldiers will. It's as simple as that. For us, there's an enormous opportunity in that. And you know, just maybe to give it a little bit of perspective, only 12% of cities in Africa are connected by one flight a week. Just think about it. 12%. 12% of cities are connected with one flight a week. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of the challenge, but also the opportunity. Why do we continue to do it? I think a number of reasons. You know, certainly for us, we've got the patience, and we're a network business. In order for us to truly be the logistics company of the world, that has to be said in Africa as well. And the only way that you can be the logistics company in Africa is to be present in every market. And we don't do that because of philanthropic reasons. You know, I mean, it just, you know, doesn't exist for that reason. There is still very good business in Africa. A little bit to Adrian's point earlier on, if you think about the extractive nature of the continent, and it's been the case for, you know, decades upon decades, but that is changing. That is absolutely changing. If we look at the changes in the energy sector, if we look at the changes in the agricultural sector, that is slowly but surely starting to change, which brings about another opportunity for us from a commercial point of view. And then Africa has got incredible potential. You know, we're all familiar with a mobile example. You know, I think it was 3%, Adrian, you're better with numbers than what I am. I think 3% of people, or the population in Africa, had access to a telephone in the early 90s. Fast forward, what's happened now, you've got 2.5 handhelds per person on this continent. So we leapfrog the development. And I think it'll be the same for us from a commerce point of view. And in order for that to happen, you've got to be present from a logistics point of view. But I would also say that you have to have patience. You know, oftentimes, it's interesting, Adrian and I had a conversation over a cup of coffee about a piece of work he's just done. And oftentimes, you know, when people say, well, where do I invest? Where do I go first? People go, I want to go to Nigeria, you know, because there's 220 million people. I want to go to Ethiopia, there's 110 million people. And then oftentimes, that's where it goes wrong. Because there's no patience, there's no understanding of the diversity, there's no understanding of the cultural differences. And somehow, we want to make sure that every time we jump into Africa, you know, we make these quantum leaps, rather than to kind of do the age-old, you know, you start by crawling, then walking, then running. So, bit of a long answer to a short question, but there's an abundance of opportunity on this continent, and I'm a firm believer of that.
And if you don't,
Francois, am I allowed into the panel questions?
I'll have to think about it. Of course.
So, I know that this breaks protocol. Through the chairman. No, we'll come back. We'll come to questions in a moment.
Yeah.
Through the chair. So, Hennie, could you give a non-South African example of a city that is, first or second city, that is breaking that extractive pattern?
Yeah, so I think, you know, let me talk about Kenya, because that's probably the best example we have right now. If you look at what they're doing in terms of agriculture and their coffee industry, yeah, I think it is phenomenal, because there's the understanding, first and foremost, and probably equally as important, there's the political want to change that, and the understanding of the benefits. You know, what is happening typically in the coffee industry, and for those of you that are coffee lovers, you'll know that some of the best coffee comes from this continent. They will send samples abroad, so it's your 250-gram sample. The buyer in New York for Starbucks loves the coffee, and the next moment we export tons and tons of the beans. Dial that back, that's all changing now. Now we're starting to do the end user packaging and roasting in Kenya. Now government's understanding that by them promoting and supporting that industry, how much more comes back into the country. Suddenly you see an agricultural sector that's had probably a handful of farmers, where there are now dozens and dozens of SME farmers starting to benefit through the co-ops and the structures that have been created. You know, there's the vanilla example in Tanzania, where they're following a very similar kind of plan and protocol, if you want. So Kenya, for me, is probably the best example of that right now, Adrian.
But I want to come back to that point, and I want to talk about leapfrogging that Hennie mentioned. Is it possible for Africa to leapfrog industrialization, manufacturing and mining, and directly jump to services, Adrian? Is it possible for Africa to grow and to become rich before it becomes old by not following the conventional industrialization model of economic development? Is there such a thing as leapfrogging in development?
I mean, you're giving me a segue here to talk about the six-factor work, but I'll manage that I don't amplify this. The big ingredient, Hennie references this, and Siphelele, with your abundant cities, you reference it also, is we've got people. That's the abundant resource. By the middle of this century, the bulk of the workforce in the world will be young Africans. And I don't think that this point has been taken seriously yet by advanced nations. That they haven't, it is yet to dawn on them how challenging it is to sustain a society with absent youth. We've got some early examples of what happens when your demographic pyramid inverts. Japan, South Korea, Russia, Italy, and most recently China. And when your population pyramid inverts, you land up with 1 child, 2 parents, 4 grandparents. And most of the world, most of the advanced world is funded on a pay-as-you-go system. So they are about to retire into pension systems that are unfunded, and they do not have the youth to feed that funding system. There's a massive social convulsion that is in the making there. I'm not sure how far away we are from it. The boomers are probably going to get a little bit of a free pass, but perhaps a decade or so from now, it will be an inescapable financial stranglehold. That is a crisis of global or advanced country proportion. Africa has the cure. And the cure is young people.